Hi, and welcome to pm4py tutorial number 6 on exporting event data. Um, it's been a while since we've recorded a tutorial. That doesn't mean that we haven't been active. On the contrary, we've been quite active in developing pm4py further and creating tutorial videos sadly has been a bit low on our priority list, but we're trying to put it a bit higher on the priority list. So in the nearby future, we will probably release some more tutorial videos. Today will be a fairly short tutorial on how to export event data. Certain things will be extremely easy and other things will be a bit more involved. So what we're going to talk about, first of all, I hope you remember that in pm4py we support data frames that you might need to convert a bit to accommodate the fact that the data frame is containing event data. And we also have our built-in pm4py event log objects. So what we're going to look at is exporting both of these objects to both CSV files and XCS files. Of course, in the case that we export to CSV files, we're actually using pandas underneath. So any other type of output that is supported by pandas, you can also convert any event log or data frame to. All right, so let's first, before we dive into this exporting, let's first talk about the variables that we're going to see in this demo today. I have preloaded two event logs, one event log that was recorded as a CSV file. And as you can see in this line here, I'm importing it as a data frame. So what I do is I'm reading a CSV file that is located under a folder in my local environment that's called running example CSV with a comma separator. As a separator, it has a semicolon. So as you can see, I'm using the pandas read CSV functionality for that. And then on top of that, I'm applying this pm4py format data frame function that actually makes sure that the appropriate columns within that data frame get the appropriate names for pm4py to automatically work with the data, right? So the case identifier in this data set, as we can see here, has in the underlying CSV file has a name case underscore ID. The activity key is named activity in that data. And finally, the timestamp key is recorded as a timestamp. And second variable log underscore XES, I'm basically using the pm4py read underscore access function that you can see here. That is basically importing an XES file under the same folder called running underscore example access, and these are the same event logs that we've been using before. Okay, so first of all, very simple. If we have a data frame that's already in the right shape, converting it to a CSV file or any other file that's supported by pandas is of course trivial because we just use the to_CSV function that is directly that we can directly call on the data frame itself. So that's really nothing special. It's just pandas. So I also refer to the pandas website or any other type of documentation that you can find on the web that is actively talking about this. I won't go into detail. However, when we run this to_CSV code here, and we then invoke pandas.read underscore CSV with the same file that we just exported that you can see on the top of the slide, we observe that indeed, again, this event data that we have imported before was exported as a CSV file, and we can actually successfully load it in pm4py. So obviously, just using a data frame, you can just directly use the to_CSV function of pandas to export it. That's obvious. One thing that is worth noting is that, as you can see, pm4py actively renamed the case ID, the activity, and the timestamp column in the original data to the standardized column names that we use in pm4py, which is case colon concept colon name for the case identifier, concept column name for the activity key, and time colon timestamp for the timestamps. Again, this is already extensively discussed in the video about importing data into pm4py, including more background information about the XCS standard. So I refer to that video if you're lost here. All right, then it gets more interesting. So if we have data frames and we want to store them as XCS files, this is actually also fairly easy in pm4py. Basically, we just need to invoke the write XCS function of pm4py, and that does the trick for us. So, and the nice thing is that we can give as an argument to this function our data frame. And of course, we can specify a path and a target file name. pm4py will detect that the input that you give to the write_access function is a data frame. It will then invoke a transformation of that data frame to the pm4py event log object, which is then exported to an XCS file. So you can just directly parse your data frame. And in this case, as we can see, we're going to export this file to the data into a file called running_example_csv_exported_s_access.access. So it's a CSV file originally that I've exported as an XCS file. And if we, as you can see here, import that same file by using pm4py.read_xcs, which we've already seen before, you indeed see that it's actually accurately loading an event log in pm4py. All right, so that was storing event data that is in a data frame as an XCS file. It's basically just writing pm4py.write XCS. Then, of course, we can also store event logs as event log objects as CSV files. And that, I would say, is it's not complicated, but it's the most quote unquote involved operation, because what we need to do is we first need to convert the event log that is in an event log object. So in this running example, I've called that object log_access because the source of that variable was an XCS file. But internally, this log_XCS variable that we see here is basically just a pm4py event log object, which is not necessarily tightly coupled to the XCS standard. But what we can see here is that we first need to simply convert it to a data frame. And that conversion is very straightforward. So obviously, every event attribute will be positioned in a specific column. Trace attributes will be replicated. For every event that belongs to the same trace, the trace attribute will be replicated. And then you have your table, your event table, a data frame like the one we've seen before. And then, of course, the same trick applies to what we've seen before. Just use pandas to export it. So that's very easy. And again, here you can see actually that when we read that same running example, we again get data that was originally coming from an XCS file, now stored as a CSV file. And finally, to conclude this tutorial, how to export an event log object to an XCS file is straightforward. We've basically seen it before with the data frame. We can just directly add our pm4py. We can directly put our access object, our log_access, as an input for our function in pm4py that writes to access file, that is the write_access function. And if we do that again, if we read it as access file, we see that it is accurately parsed. So as I said, a very straightforward functionality today, so not a lot to talk about. today. In the upcoming demonstration, we'll be looking at process discovery. So that's where it's getting a bit more into the algorithmic details of process mining. So thanks for watching, and I hope that you enjoyed this tutorial series, and I hope to see you in the next tutorial.